Marshall. I'm an artistic associate at Skylight Theater Company, and welcome to Skylight Live. Tonight marks our first panel for the We're Not Free Until We're All Free series, and it is in celebration of Juneteenth. Tonight's panel is called Beyond the Binary, with some really special folks to chat about identity, to chat about expression, to chat about this country, and to chat about the gender binary or lack thereof. I can't wait to hear what these folks have to say. The gems are going to be there, trust me, so get your paper, get your pen, write it all down, because this is going to be a special night. I also wanted to remind you, or maybe let you know, we got a show coming up at Skylight. It's called Lavender Men by Roger Q. Mason, and it opens August 6th. And guess what? Tickets are on sale right now. So if you head to our website, grab a ticket. I can't wait to see you there, and you'll definitely see me, so say hi. I would love to meet you all, because, you know, we've been stuck in this screen world. Anyway, I am proud and honored to introduce to y'all our moderator for this evening, Gaven Trinidad, all the way from New York City. Take it away, Gaven Trinidad.
Hi, my name is Gaven, rhymes with Raven. They, them, I am, for visual description, I am a brown Filipinx, gender non-conforming person standing right in front of you wearing a pink shirt that says Hex the Patriarchy. And I'm so excited to be here. And before we start and bring out the fabulous, fabulous, and honorable artists here on the panel, just wanted to take a moment to share with you all and to acknowledge that the work of Skylight, and as well as the participants, we are both in LA and in New York, that we are on the unceded lands of the Tongva and the Chumash and the Munsee Lenape people. And also, we would like to acknowledge the generations of enslaved Black folk who have built this country culturally, physically, and spiritually, as well as the generations of immigrants who continue to feed this country, as well as our trans sisters and brothers who have really started the revolution, the riots of Stonewall, to bring us to where we are. And just a reminder that this panel is because we are also looking at and acknowledging the history of Juneteenth and the intersections of where our identities of brown, black, and POC folk come together. And with all that said, I just want you all to come and think about your individual and collective responsibilities of how we could usher in beyond a world beyond the binary, and what does that mean for us to do, to fight, and to celebrate each other. And so, I thank you for all of that, and just want to also acknowledge the news of the past week has been both hard and celebratory, both with the Supreme Court ruling, as well as celebration of Pride, and it's okay to live in those dualities. And I just want to welcome everyone in with as much generosity and love that we can muster. And so with that, I would like to bring in our panelists, our guests, who can please introduce yourselves. I would like to bring in Ianne Fields Stewart. Ianne, please join me.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Ianne.
Hi, honey. Yes, my name is Ianne Fields Stewart. I use they, she pronouns. I am currently on occupied Lenape land, otherwise known as Brooklyn, otherwise known as the continuously gentrified space where Black and Brown people have continued to create and manifest homes and neighborhoods and families. For any sort of visual accessibility, I'm a Black trans woman. I am lighter skinned. I have my hair in a gorgeous little blue scarf with gold detailing. I'm wearing a chain necklace that belonged to my dear friend Bays Olutunde Lateef White, who has since passed on from this world. And I am wearing a dark gray shirt with a picture of the members of STAR, Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, in a square center against a white background.
And may I also bring in Jairo? Jairo, please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Jairo Rivas. I use they, them, or she, her pronouns if you're feeling feisty. I'm in Chumash land here in Los Angeles. And I'm wearing this stunning little pink scarf. I have like an oxblood lipstick. I got a little hair moment going on and some, fishnet tights if you're feeling feisty. So yeah, I am a performer. I'm a writer. I design shadow puppetry. So I'm also a theater maker in that realm as well. And I've done a lot of immersive work here in Los Angeles. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here.
And of course, last but not least, Roger Q. Mason. Roger.
Well, hello, darlings. My name is Roger Q. Mason, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs. And I am in my birthplace, which is where I always come to do these conversations, the unceded land of the Tongva people. And that is otherwise known as Santa Monica. I am in a sound booth, which has some wood paneling, and the top is sort of a gray soundproofing so that you all can hear me more warmly. And I have my hair with activated curls. I am Black and Filipino, so that means that I am filled with caramel lovejoy in my complexion. I am wearing some glasses that I call the electric Dalai Lama because they are 1960s metal and plastic frames, very similar to the ones that the Dalai Lama wore in the 60s and early 70s. And I'm wearing a black t-shirt. Nothing is on it. Today was a work day, dolls.
I got you. Well, we all introduce ourselves. How are you all? How's your hearts today? You could popcorn it. I'm just saying.
I am caught between the joy that I've continuously found in survival and the grief that I feel in resistance.
I'm feeling tight. I'm just feeling it all in my chest. I'm just feeling very tight. Like I can't take a deep breath. And it's been going on for a while now. And I think that's just the state of everything. Yeah. But I'm very happy to be here too. So it's that duality. It's the two.
No, I feel you both. I didn't even know whether or not I joined the protest, but I didn't know whether or not to also go out and celebrate Pride, like with just my chosen family. The idea is like, Ianne, as you're saying, there's just the joy in survival. But I also I was just stuck in that middle place. Yeah.
Every time you ask that question, I fall in love with you again, because how many times are we asked to really contend with our innermost, honest, unveneered self? It's the most unassuming and arresting question you can ask someone. How is your heart? I was at my physical exam this week, and we were talking about working through various vices and addictions. And I'll talk about mine. I will. I work with food addiction. And we were talking about it, and I said to the doctor, what do we do? And he said, do you want me to answer you as a human being or as the physician? I said, answer as yourself. And he said, I don't know, because I struggle with it too.
Wow.
I said, and what do you do as you struggle? And he said, I search for grace.
Okay, then.
That was what my Western, pill incentivized physician, who is supposed to be selling me some weight loss pill. He's supposed to be giving me some, analgesic that just puts a Band-Aid and puts me further and further into debt and dependency on some chemical to regulate the behavior that I exhibit because I exist in a world that distresses and destroys me daily. And the prescription he gave me was find grace. So that's where I am. I'm seeking grace.
Can I tell you, Roger, where that question came from? I started asking where people's hearts were because I had a friend that always asked me, is your day good? And so it's always the binary of yes and no. I never found that. Yeah, you see, I brought it all back. We're going
It's cyclical, honey.
Big dramaturg. But no, it came from
not the
dramaturg.
Don't leave home without one.
Everyone write that down. But it really came from an honest place, and I also think it came from my sense of queerness. Just wanting someone to see me whole and also take time for reflection. And so I thank you all for joining in that ritual, because as Roger can tell you, I ask them every day.
You really do. You really do.
I'm also so not immature, but I absolutely love that you said you wanted to be, as a queer person, you wanted to be seen, someone to see you whole. I'm not mature, but that made me giggle. Keep going.
It's fine.
Not mature at all.
So we are all artists, and something I would love just to know, because, there's always a story. How did art find you? I could tell you mine. I was learning English, and I learned English through VHS tapes of musicals. And I have this vivid memory of my mother writing down the lyrics to Annie of the song Tomorrow. And I asked for my 5th birthday. There is a picture. This is how I knew I was a homosexualist. Once, I asked for my 5th birthday. The remastered VHS copy of My Fair Lady.
Oh, God.
Work.
Done.
Yes. I pass it off. Who has the spirit in them too?
I can answer really quickly. I started dancing at the age of 4, and so I've really only ever known a life in the arts and a life on stage. I once had my palm read when I was in Chicago, and the person said that I have been an actress in all of my lifetimes, which I agree with. So I think, I feel like I've only really ever known a life in the arts, and I really wouldn't have it any other way.
I think it's the same for me. It's just as a child, I think it started with my dolls. I had my little dolls, and I would tell stories with them, and I played with those for a very, very long time, and then I started doing theater in school. I started doing there's something at a program at my school called Theater for Social Change, and that's kind of what took off for me. I've always been doing it, always been telling stories.
I'm going to talk about duality, and I think this is a theme, and respectability. Because there were 2 artists, the one that I was groomed to be and the one that I needed to be. My grandmother was very interested in cultivating what she called Renaissance men. And I'm recalling the Renaissance for its Western and imperialist undertones, and I'm saying men for its gendered and result-oriented respectability. She was interested in cultivating in us, her grandchildren, 7 skills. So we learned piano, we wrote, we we danced, we painted, we did poetry recitation, we did pottery. What was the 7th one? There was musicianship, vocal performance. That was the world that I was trained into. I would say at about 3 years old, I remember starting to take ballet class. Now, you see, that had its limits in a gendered world, because you're supposed to do it to a certain extent and then start playing flag football, never forgetting the grace and the intellectualism that you learned, but you're supposed to now move on from there and sort of become one of the boys. But I sort of stayed in that moment. Now, while that was happening, one of the big hit movies at the time was Beauty and the Beast. And I remember, I've never shared this story. I remember having a sheet that was yellow. I would find this sheet and I would turn on the cassette tape. And it was that opening song, you know, the one where she's swarming around. She's nothing like the rest of us. Something subconsciously resonated for me with that song. And I would pantomime performing it for myself as if I were Belle in some castle performing. And it was a private devotion that I would do constantly. I also did, I think, The Little Mermaid at the time, part of that world. So these notions of outsider status really spoke to me. And that was the other person. That was the person that would become the feared, quote, sissy ass artist. Mm-hmm. And that was the person that would go and audition for shows between middle and high school and get taken out for fear that I would catch the disease of effeminacy, quote unquote. And so there was this discrepancy between the world that I was exposed to and my feminized internalization of it. You were supposed to pick from it what was useful, but allowed you to become a cultured man of letters. And for many years, I wanted to become considered a man of letters. I'm no longer interested in either of those things, neither the man nor the of letters part of it. I'm less interested in a result-oriented, literary, two-dimensional relationship to our work. And I'm certainly less interested in a product-oriented, masculinized, colonizing vision of authorship and authority. Mm-hmm. What I found on the subways with Ianne in 2018 and 19, what I found at the pizza parlor with Jairo in 2019, what I found with Michael Alvarez and Hook and Eye Theater when I was relegated to play the role of Molasses Jones in my piece, The Pride of Lions, about 1920s female impersonators and their imprisonment, was that I was my best self when those two people became one. Mm. That the writer and the performer, the masculine and the feminine, the ephemeral and the result-oriented existed in some kind of fluid, non-binary amalgamation. Mm. And that union, that embracing, has afforded me an honesty and a freedom that is responsible for why I make the work and why I create the chosen family that I do now. So when did art find me? Yesterday, 10 years ago, when I was born, when I forgot that what I wanted to do was wrong, when I was told that who I wanted to be was improper, and when I found out that that was a lie, and when I said, fuck what's proper, let me be real. That's when when art found me. And I think art is finding me constantly, because life is finding me constantly, and I'm having to use art. One thing I will say from that Renaissance man of letters moment, I went to a place called Mission Renaissance, which was a fine arts academy, and they defined art as arising from an Arabic word, which meant putting fine things together, the idea of pastiche and collage. And I think that if we're constantly engaging actively in the world in meaning making, and we're creating some kind of understanding that's generative and constructive, then we're always artists.
Well, there you go.
We're done. Okay.
Good night. Thank you so much, Tyree. Have a nice evening, Seth. Goodbye.
You know, what's so lovely, what you're saying, everyone's saying, is that there's a moment in which, you know, art has always been part of all of our lives. And Roger, you were talking about how art rediscovers, but I would love to go back to what you're saying about the challenging moments, like when you're talking about the very gendered moments of like when your grandmother really wanted you to be a man of words and what that meant. I went to an all-boys school, and it just so happened that they would always cast me in drag. I was always in drag, and a lot of it was not my choice, but I found a home in it, and I found myself going, like, it was also like I was like during the Bush era, so there was this, you know, and it was a Catholic school, and so there was just a lot of politics to go around, and I was trying to really define myself as, you know, this queer baby, but at the same time, in a very quiet sense, I found liberation in the performances I was doing, but at the same time of, you know, within that very gendered world of an all-boys Catholic school, what kind of safety, or where is my sense of belonging once I get off the stage, and what that meant for me. I don't know, it just popped up, and I was like trying to think of like, when did that binary break for me? And I think it's something that really like hit me until my late 20s, where I finally felt comfortable in my skin, because, you know, I was a kid who loved Audrey Hepburn. I was 5 years old. We got the story. But, you know, how ingrained it is, you know, in my father was so machismo, he would see me running around, he would grab my hand, and he said, "You make a fist, boys make fists." And so really trying to get that out of my body, and you know, being gracious to myself, that was hard, even as an artist, trying to find what that graciousness was. I don't know if anyone else has had.
Well, as you were talking, I was thinking, as you were talking, Roger, about like Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid, I was like trying to think back to like who my first inspirations were, and I was thinking, and like it was the Brandy and Whitney Houston Cinderella, the only real Cinderella, the Pocahontas and her hair, Mulan, like those were like so I feel like, and in general, like growing up, I was from a very early age, I knew that I was breaking all the rules because I was told that. Like I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, so like there was never really a time where I thought that being a man in the way that I understood that other people were men was never an option for me, or really something I was ever interested in. And I, looking back, I think about it, and it's like the kind of women that I found myself fascinated by, the, you know, for some reason, Mae West is coming to mind, especially. It's like an early influence of like, which was just very much like these women who whose brazen sexuality and brazen sensuality and brazen femininity was wielded as a weapon. If I think about like Mulan, in ways it's like just women who were very disinterested in doing what society told them to do and preferred to break all of the rules. Those were the women that I was drawn to. And in many ways, those were the women that I was raised by, women who in various, you know, small and big ways really broke the rules of society. So I always sort of was raised with the understanding of womanhood as something that broke rules, something that was othered, something that was always going to be anti-patriarchal, and in many ways anti-men. And so my alignment with womanhood and femininity, you know, I mean, there's always that kind of that narrative that, you know, we are an ally before we become part of a community. And so like, I always thought of myself, you know, as an ally to the women's movement, right? And then it was like, girl, you kind of just stop playing, you know? And so I think it's just interesting, the relationship that art has always had, that was that, you know, I kind of always came into it with a bit of naivete, and that sort of is the thing that has kind of saved me and saved my sense of it and my sense of self over the years. I think is that like for someone who like is very focused on like all the ways that the world is wrong, I actually have quite a bit of naivety about what I believe about people and humanity. And so I always just understood, I was like, well, theater is where everyone who's an other goes to. So no one in theater would ever, you know, question or shape or conform me. And that belief, that mindset, that like, you know, that I understood that theater was where the weirdos went, you know. And so I, knowing that I was a weirdo, went to go where the weirdos were. And slowly over the years, you know, and it took coming to New York and really seeing what theater like professionally looks like to understand that, you know, the kind of theater that I had fallen in love with, the kind of theater that I was, forgive this white hand in the corner of my screen, it's very annoying. But like, you know, for all the kind of theater that I had fallen in love with, which was coming out of the golden age, going into, you know, the 80s and the 90s, where you have this much more, where Broadway was still a very grungy and dirty and filthy place, you know. That kind of theater didn't really exist anymore. And it had been replaced by the Disneyfication of Broadway and of theater had kind of become far spread, and the popification as well of theater and musical theater, and specifically because that's the world that I have the most formal training in. But that world of theater like had kind of disappeared. And it's something that I've actually had to grapple with, especially coming, you know, I'm currently back on the stage, but it's the first time in 2 years since the pandemic. So kind of coming back onto the stage, it's still seeing the ways, it's still seeing the ways in which the theater that is being created today, and when I say the theater is being created today, I'm not speaking of the work that happens in more community-based spaces or true theater, right? I'm thinking more of like the theater that's happening that gets funding, the theater that happens that gets attention, the theater that happens that gets, you know, celebrities and stars to come in and do it. That kind of theater is no longer, it just doesn't look like what it used to at all. It is much more about making sure that the Black woman sings a high A, B, C, D, C, da, 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 and she belts and skrelts, and the audience stands on their feet. A lot of the theater of today is not really asking audiences to think very much, but it's selling to patrons. And I think that I mourn that kind of theater. And I don't think that it's impossible to still find it. I think shows like A Strange Loop are working within that microcosm of theater and still managing to create really impactful and exciting new stories. But it is undeniably an uphill climb to try to tell stories on Broadway stages that, and off Broadway stages even, that have the same kind of impact that they used to have. A lot of those golden age musicals that now, you know, feel very stale, were not very stale at all at the time, you know? And it's sort of like, that's what theater used to do. It used to really, theater at that level used to still be able to like really impact and excite and make people think. And I think as the world has moved on, and grown and developed, theater has remained very stagnant. So I think when we have this conversation about the binary, I often think of it in that way. I hope I've answered this question, whatever this tangent is that I've could run off. But anyway,
Just having a conversation.
oh, we love ADHD. Yeah, the work that I think is being produced, I say that very specifically, being produced, not being created, but being produced. The work that is being produced at a higher level, the theater has not grown with the world. It's remained kind of stuck in one mindset. Like, I mean, I think that's indicative of, you know, we can see that in just how the theater has handled COVID-19, you know? Many of the people who are now on Broadway, like, you know, we put all these Black playwrights and Black people as the scapegoats to reopening an industry to a deadly global pandemic, and used these Black bodies as sort of like, you know, the I think the phrase is the canary in the gold mine, you know. And so that doesn't feel like revolution. That doesn't feel like change to me. That just feels like the same old, same old. Yeah.
But you see how that snuck up on you though? Because it took us a minute to realize what that moment was, because the way it was framed at the time was, we're coming back and we got a brand new bag. We're committed to visible signs of equity and inclusion on these stages. That's how the marketing was spun to us. And it was so exciting. I mean, I remember those images from a lot of those shows. They would show those throngs of people returning, masked and eager to be out of their homes, returning to the Great White Way. And it was capturing the return to the theater. Now, one of the things is, those were first responders and essential workers that were resuscitating an industry. Where is their Purple Heart? Where is their plaque?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about an industry that was put on hold for 2 years, and they put those folks out to see, now, what temperature should this room be? What are the ways, the types of things we should ask audience members to do in order to prepare? The experimentation.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, you know, I start thinking about Tuskegee in a way. I start thinking about Henrietta Lacks.
And also
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, I wouldn't be thinking that if there was a congratulation and an expression of gratitude. You all went first, and we want to thank you and acknowledge you. And see, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I worry about what it means when we are asked to work in these highly visible positions. We were in a talk that was broadcast, so I can say this, I quote, because it was on the recording. You remember that young woman in the talk who was saying, we're talking about returning to the theater and building a space in these highly visible places. And this person's response was, I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Yeah.
That it's a dangerous road to be working, you know, in big, they say big pharma, big show business.
Right. Ooh, big show business. I like that.
You know what I mean? It's a risk and a toll on our bodies. And in some cases, we do become the experiments or the scapegoats or the canaries in the gold mine. And the question becomes, how do we pick up the pieces that are left and use them for our own sustainability? Because when that moment ends, we still exist. When the Harlem Renaissance ended, there was a generation of Black writers that still needed to pay their rent, but they no longer had that same outward and vehement expression of white patronage. But their needs never stopped. So what happens to them then? So we have to be both. I think duality is real. We have to be simultaneously optimistic but skeptical of progress, depending on who's doling it out.
And Roger, when I'm thinking of, as you're saying, who's doling it out, I'm always surprised as a theater artist, the lack of imagination of some. Oh, I guess I'm going to step on toes of some.
Oh, honey, I've stepped on 20 already, so it's all right.
But when we talk about equity, what does that mean? When we talk about representation, it is a place in which I am just surprised at the lack of imagination of what that can be and what does it look like off stage. That's the key thing for me. What does that look like off stage?
Yeah. And here's the thing, though. I think that I would love to say that it's a lack of imagination. But I'm gonna push up against it a little bit because I think I think that we are giving those in power a little too much grace. I don't think that it is a lack of imagination. I think it's a lack of care. I think it's a lack of interest. I think I think it is actually just a stronger desire to hold on to power than you have to create spaces. I mean, it is a thing of this industry that people are not interested in making. They don't want more options. The doors to the industry have never necessarily been open. Like, I mean, if we think about what it looks like to be the most, let's say commercially successful in this industry, you're working in a space and in a theater where more often than not, if you want the people that you may even say you want in the audience can't afford to come to your show. I think I know that we're talking about the binary, and so I want to talk specifically from that perspective, but thinking about, I'll call Hamilton out because I don't care. But Hamilton, this was prior to the pandemic, but I had an audition with Hamilton. They wanted me to come in to audition for the tour. And it says explicitly, we are interested in trans artists auditioning for this. And they sent over the music, and I looked at the music and I said, I mean, I can't sing that. I can sing about 3/4 of that, but this little section here, I'm not gonna be able to sing it. What, are you all gonna change notes? Because you said you want us, so I'm assuming you've been a part of these conversations. And I know that they have been, actually, because I've helped them with those conversations, to be quite frank. So, so to and the response was, no, we can't change it, sorry. So I don't think it actually is a lack of, what was the phrase that you used?
Imagination.
A lack of imagination. I think they can imagine a world in which we are center stage, and that's the world that they're scared of. They don't want to imagine a world in which queer and trans people and Black and brown people and Black and brown queer and trans people are at the center of these stories, because they can sense that the social movement is slowly moving to a place where it's like, the more y'all stay rigid, the more we're going to just push you out.
But
You know,
what role,
I think the window where we could have like lived in this very utopic narrative that people still kind of are holding on to, where those in power will just suddenly come to their senses and say, ah, yes, now we will, you know, relinquish our power and share equally, and all of us will come together. That utopic image of inclusion or diversity or whatever phrase we're using today to describe what liberation and joy and freedom looks like on stage, that I think that utopic window is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's harder and harder to believe in it. And to be quite frank, I don't, so I can't promote anybody else in believing in it.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
What role does slothfulness play in this? And I want to quote an interview. Yeah, we'll take that white thumbs up for this one. That works. Well, I'm wondering
Hey.
what role slothfulness plays. I'm remembering an interview that Diane Carroll gave. She said she had just gotten the nomination for Claudine, and she was on a plane from New York to LA, and Sue Mangers was on the plane with her. And they're sitting together, and she says, you know, I'm going back to Los Angeles because I'm going to the Academy Awards, and I've been trying to be represented by you for you. When are you going to represent me? Because you're the best. And Sue says, never. She says, do you know how much work I would have to do to turn you into the star that you deserve to be? And I just can't do it. And Diane says she looked at that moment and she said she acknowledged what it meant, but for her to become the success, but also how difficult that road was, but the amount of social work that it would actually take in order to create that kind of society. And I wonder if some people are happy to just virtue signal when it's convenient, cash their socially woke chips, and then go back to the normalcy that they know and that's comfortable. Who wants to be on the firing squad in the front line? We're in an emergency right now. We have justices on the Supreme Court threatening to roll back every progressive law that has become understood as a maintenance system for human kindness and decency. The irony is that one of the laws that could be rolled back is in fact the very one that allows that man to be married to his own white wife. But nobody's talking about Loving versus Virginia, because that's not convenient for that platform to justify its particular behavior. They only want to cherry pick and talk about repealing the ones that make them uncomfortable. This whole notion of living in a state where you can't say a word because it makes you uncomfortable about your fragile relationship to your gender and sexuality. Let me just say something right now. If your gender and sexuality is so tenuous and fragile that saying a word can break it, it was never built on solid ground to begin with. That was a motherfucking lie. And I think the fact that so many of the social structures and strictures that make people feel safe and comfortable in our society are based on fictitious systems of control and binary limitation. The fact that you can light a match in this toothpick-built house and the entire place would go ablaze in a moment is exactly the reason why folks are fighting to their dying days to make America great again, because they are seeing the true conflagration that will set their world ablaze and it will never return. And so a generation is left to think and ponder, what did I fight for? What did I live for? What was I taught in that high school as I sat on one bus and Black boy number 52 sat on a different one? What did mama stay at home and take all of these pills to swallow down a bitter truth? What did daddy drink himself into the ground and have a mortgage that I'm still paying off? What did he do that for? He was buying into a lie, Ozzy and Harriet. And you just figuring it out. 75 years later, and you sitting here with hypertension and you just now figuring it out, and it's driving you crazy. And half of your health problems are based on the fact that you are existing in a world that doesn't even value your human life, but you still want to vote in a certain way because I'd rather know that I'm an aspirant of this particular identity politics, and I'd rather sacrifice myself. What was it that James Baldwin said? No matter how sick or how poor or how ill of spirit the white man may be, at least he can go to bed at night and know one thing, that he's not, a Negro. Y'all remember that one?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what we're talking about. So the whole point of this talk, and I want to bring Jairo here, because child, you've been too silent, and I know you got some thoughts, but the whole point is no one's free unless we're all free. Breaking the binary. Well, you start by acknowledging, I think, and see, I'm being more feisty and political today. I'm realizing I've never talked like this in public. Oops. I really haven't. Not on these kind of things.
Was like, what is
I mean, but I mean, the way that you break the binary, I think, is that you transform your society. We have to leave fear and scarcity-based living behind.
But that's all through the.
Go ahead, baby. Go ahead.
But that's, it's hard coming back into person because it is, as you're saying, the toothpick house. Our theater industry lives off of that scarcity model.
Absolutely.
And so seeing myself, like colleagues really trying, and throughout the industry really trying to not leave but continue just trying to rebuild the toothpicks in different ways is kind of wild to me.
And can I just say something? It's I want to acknowledge, because I don't, you and I and all of us have had healthy and constructive relationships with theaters and theater artists. All of us have. We've had bad ones and we've had good ones, but I want those listening today and in the future over the next week, as I was told that this will be available to the public, to understand. And I've seen firsthand, working with the Dramatists Guild and National Queer Theater, the devotion of so many theaters, large and small, to really doing the work. And I won't, put myself in jeopardy by trying to name a few, because if I don't name all of them, I'll insult somebody in these 50 great states. But I just want folks to know that this is not an indictment monolithically. So this is a health checkup for everybody. And I do want to acknowledge one thing, which is that some of this scarcity comes from the fact that so many of our industries, including theater making, are privatized when in fact they should be publicly funded. We have a fetish for British theater making, and any British theater maker that's in here, we still love you. But, I mean, when those shows come from the West End or they come from the, National Theater, what we don't acknowledge and what we don't talk about is they have what we never will, which is the resources and the wealth of time and opportunity to really develop those shows in publicly funded workshops that go on for months and months and months without worry about, that are not product oriented, until they develop something that moves the human spirit with the proficiency that can then be simultaneously commercial while still challenging form and structure. There's a step missing, which is the public funding of art and artists. And so these theaters and these artistic leaders, the ones that we're talking about that are good intentioned, are stuck trying to keep their doors open, and they are dependent on donors, boards, and patrons, because at least I know that allows me to make certain aspects of my budget happen. This is business. There's certain bills and certain utilities that I've got to pay. I've got to pay my water, lights, and gas. If not, I'm gonna lose this house. And so they depend on those houses in order to figure out how to maintain that. Now, I'm not on their budgetary staff. I've not been brought into many of their competencies yet. So don't quote me, and don't get upset, American Theater. Don't get upset about that. Get upset about something else. But that's why that system is in place. And we also exist in a society that does not incentivize risk. It makes risk expensive. It's called the insurance industry. It, in fact, makes us fear risk. Well, first of all, as I said at the TCG conference, new writers, local writers, queer writers, trans writers, POC, we're not risks. But even if we were, we need to, that's the other thing we need to do in our society. And I'm gonna shut up in a minute, because I know we've got 5 and I want to leave them to somebody else. We've got to learn to do 2 other things. Y'all ready for these 2? And then I'll speak nevermore. Embrace discomfort and celebrate the unknown. And that's what queerness can teach you, because that's the understanding of the divine feminine. And that's what queerness can teach you. All right, take it away, baby. I'm muting.
I've just been absorbing everything that y'all have been saying, because the tea has been spilled and I am drinking it all up. But I keep thinking about, you mentioned the word slothfulness in this industry, and I think there's that, and there's the fear as well, the slothfulness of to find us, to find our bodies, to find our community, right? To invite us into the room in these spaces. I don't see many, not all the time, bodies like us in spaces of high power. And that's just what I've experienced thus far. And the people that are trying to bring us in, rope us in, they have to do the work to understand how we fit in, and not how we fit in, how we belong, right? So I think there's there's that laziness of like, I'm afraid to do that work, because I have to confront all this stuff within me. And then at the same time, it's the fear of messing it up and getting it wrong. I mean, you just see with our pronouns alone, it's like, oh my gosh, I've been on set and they've messed my pronouns up, and it's a whole moment. And for some, it is a whole moment, and it should be. But, for some of us, it's okay. Like, we get it. It happens every once in a while. A pronoun slips. And I think that's the fear that still exists of, we live in a culture where we have to be so politically right and get it all, know everything, and do all this work. And people, don't want to, or they're afraid to. And it's all of those things that are happening. And I keep going to shows, and I keep seeing the same types of bodies, the same types of people. And it's the slothfulness, it's that fear. And I think that's so wonderful about, being non-binary, and that discovery, and that process was, for me, was the work, right? You had to do all of this work to really just either reject kind of how we were talking about. I kept thinking in the beginning, we were talking about there was this journey to manhood in our childhoods. There was this thing that we all kind of grappled with in one way or another of where do I fit, and then how do I not for me. And it was that rejection of that thing where we were able to really start that conversation and really question where we fit and what we love and what we don't like. And I think that's kind of what these people haven't never experienced and they've never gone through, and something I wish we all have the chance to go through. And I think that's what's so amazing about the theater is it can create a space where we all have those moments where you're invited, anyone, not non-binary, cis, white, whatever, can be invited into an experience and are given permission to live through our bodies, our experiences, just for a moment to see what that might feel like for them. And I think that's what's so special about our version, our take on theater, is that we can create space for those things to happen, those changes. You guys said so many good things. Y'all blessed my brain tonight.
If I can, I just wanted to add one quick tiny little thing.
Yeah.
Which is that I think we've talked a lot tonight about many different things that, and for those coming into a conversation beyond the binary, I think that often the expectation is that like we talk about about the binary of gender and how we work outside of it or within it or around it. And I think that what this conversation has reminded me yet again of is the fact that that it is impossible to talk about gender without talking about race. It is impossible to talk about race without talking about class. It's impossible to talk about class without talking about ability. It's impossible to talk about ability without talking about land rights. It's impossible to talk about land rights without talking, it's like, and all of these things really work together. And unfortunately, despite how brilliant the work that has been done to bring intersectionality and the concept of intersectionality into a public sphere, it is still vastly misunderstood as far as what it is. I think that often people think of it as like, oh, it's just kind of like being more than one thing. And it really deeply is not that. It is truly about the ways that each of these things are interconnected and interwoven with each other. And therefore the necessity of all of us to remain active and activated in our analysis of all of these things. So when we talk about theater, we're talking about an art form that is meant in one way or the other to reflect the world back to itself. And so when we talk about, when we talk about anything about the theater, anything about storytelling in general, we have to be able to have in-depth and realistic and honest conversations about what world we are trying to reflect back to the world itself. And it is in that space, in the space between the world, its gaze on itself, and then what we as theater makers and storytellers reflect back to the world. That is where true liberation and true change happens, is in that moment when we see the world come to us, we hold it, we feel it, we smell it, we breathe it, it attacks our senses, it explodes out of our bodies. And it is when we bring all of that energy together to tell a story, that is where the true change occurs. And what that looks like in the logistics of it is we need to be talking about who tells their own story. We need to be talking about, if we are going to tell a story that has been told before, can we tell it in a new way? And why haven't we already? And if we are going to make space for new stories that have never been told before, let us make sure that they can breathe and have a life on their own. And even further than that, that we have people that work with these stories who are brave enough to give the artists that make them real and critical feedback. Because one of the worst things that's happening in the theater is that artists are being put on stage without any support around them for the exact reason that you were talking about, my love, which is that with completely unprepared, because no one is willing to say, this actually doesn't look right. And so anyone who wishes to make a change needs to be ready to make that change. But you also need to be able to still remember that this is an art form. It is a long practiced art form, and we have many tools, skills, and and artifices that we have developed in order to tell this story. And so you can, we should be building artists. I wish the theater would think of artists, whether it be writers or actors or directors or anyone. I think we should think of artists as people do in nonprofit spaces or corporate spaces, where it's like the expectation is that you are building this person so that they are ready for their next job.
Well, I think what you're talking about, what you're talking about is being people-oriented versus product-oriented.
Yeah.
There are many theaters that I've had the pleasure of meeting over the last several months. And the ones that have excited me the most have been the ones that have said, I just want to meet you and get to know you. And it's because they are figuring out, what does it mean to be in dialogue, not with your work towards a particular production, though of course all of us are excited about that prospect, but they see you, the cultural figure, but also the human being, as somebody who deserves grace and empathy and care and long-term investment. When we start investing in people, we create a sustainable web of revolutionary change. Because now we see people as three-dimensional. We see them not as a means to an end, which is what the Industrial Revolution unfortunately taught us. We don't see them as cannon fodder. We see them as people with the potentiality to grow and learn and change and give to others. And that is actually how you get free. You get free by understanding that you're connected. Now, earlier you were talking about the misunderstanding of intersectionality. I don't know how much it's misunderstood so much as it's feared, because there's great danger in someone's civic awakening. If you recognized that we were all connected, you may not participate so willingly in certain structures that are injurious to the human spirit. And we can't have that, because the dollar has to keep flowing. And it flows because you're seeking the next one. And you're seeking the next one because this one's value is going down and you need more things. But if I told you, you don't need anything, you just got to ask JoJo down the street how you do this for yourself, and then you don't have to depend on these structures, you disrupt the whole operation. And that's dangerous. So what I would say is the way we break the binary is we break into interconnection and community-based love. That's how you break the cycle. That's what Juneteenth was. Juneteenth was saying, you lied to me. You made me work an extra 2 seasons knowingly. You knew in 1863 that my ass didn't have to continue being exploited. But you had bills to pay because your son was dead in the war, your wife was sick, and you had loans to pay off. And you wanted to see how much longer you could exploit my Black body in that hot Texas sun. And they had to send somebody to tell you, you cannot do this anymore. And so today I say, finally, I persevered. I am free. I knew I was free then, but you have to recognize that I'm free. And so now who are we now that I'm free? That's the work. That's the work. We have to build a theater that understands that we are connected and that we are not our next script.
Yeah.
We are human beings who are deserving of care, love, patience, empathy, and understanding. And I believe truly when we do that, will be making art.
I don't know how to follow up with that, Roger.
Girl, you better follow up quick. I know we over time.
You still got time?
You better follow it, honey, because these
You
children,
better follow it, child.
it's 11 o'clock in New York. Your New Yorkers are falling
No, I
asleep.
know.
Your LA people are ready to Netflix and chill. You better give them girls some balm and Gilead so they can turn on Outer Banks, honey, because we on episode 7 and we got 3 more.
I know that's right.
Well, what I love about queerness, you know, is that we could come in a circle and continue the ritual of just being together.
Mm.
Tell it what it is. Welcome each other whole. And when we need to invent something new, we just fucking do it. And so that's what our people have been doing for years, decades. Yeah. And that's the fun part also. I'm just saying, being like breaking the binary. We also don't need to work within these higher structures. We've been, you know, working in the clubs. We've been working on the streets, dancing, singing. We've been doing it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was reminded this weekend too. So just needed that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
So if you have any warmth and generosity left, I know we're all tired. As Roger said, people got plans to Netflix and chill. So if you have words of warmth and generosity you would like to share out, specifically to your fellow TGNC queer artists who are watching today, what would you like to share?
I would like to share that it is irresponsible and impossible for us to gather these days and not speak of the atrocities that are going on every day. It also doesn't always make for the easiest content to absorb and watch because in a world that is constantly assaulting our senses with the latest just dreadful news, it becomes so difficult to remain activated and not to lose hope. I, as someone who is actively resisting my own slow degradation of mind and spirit around my own activation, understand this deeply. That being said, to any of the I know who I speak to, so I will speak to my people specifically, but it goes to the community as a whole. But to any Black, queer, and trans people who are watching right now, my message to you is that joy can be found in the darkest places. There is always a light somewhere, and it is often you. It is often you that is the light in the dark place. Which is not always comforting because sometimes we'd like to look to other people and other things to provide us with some light. But continue persevering. It is worth it. If anything, just because this art form is so beautiful and precious that as toxic as the industry around it may become, the art form itself remains somehow blissfully protected. And there is a reason to find a home in theater. There's also a reason to leave home, as there is with any home. But there is always a reason to find a home in the theater. And it's just worth it. Like I've gone through many a journey in the theater. I've gone through many a journey in finding myself, and the thing. And during the pandemic, when this industry disappeared, I was left, as we all were, with the question of: is this what I want to keep doing? Is this still what I love? And I went to a very dark place, and the light that brought me out of it was art. And I realized that I am an artist, and there is nothing that I can do besides be an artist. And so I cannot tell you that I have faith over how best to navigate these systems beyond, finding, just a casual few million, probably a few 100 million, if we're all the way honest, just like lying on the street somewhere and then picking it up and taking it to some building and purchasing that building, but really you're on stolen land. So that kind of stops right there. I don't know how you do it, but it is worth it, because there are those performances that you see that change your life. And and sometimes you are that performance that changes someone's life, and you may never know it. But this work is not about, we are gardeners, not flowers. And as gardeners, our role is to plant seeds. Sometimes we get to pluck a flower and add it to our own bouquet. And honey, if you do, congratulations. But the most important work happens when you plant seeds and let them bloom. So please be that gardener and plant that seed. You will build your own bouquet, and it will be beautiful, and you will set it in your mantelpiece or in your home, wherever. Mantelpiece, who am I? Where the fuck you put your flowers, that's where you're gonna put them.
She want a mantelpiece. She's talking about.
Listen, she's a little bougie.
She's talking about her mantelpiece, honey.
She's a little bougie. What can I say?
She is ready.
Girl, wherever you put your flowers, put them flowers right there. But the most important thing is to be a gardener, plant the seed, and let it bloom.
What about you, Jairo? What about you, baby?
I just want to say, I want to add you. I love everything you're saying. I just want to add that even when you feel like you're not doing the work, you are. That the days when you're just taking a walk, when you are in bed all day and that's all you can do, like that is the work, that is showing up, that is. So don't beat yourself up when it feels like you haven't done anything for a week or a month or a year. All of that is part of the process. That is all valuable time spent. So, and in these last many years, it's just been, for me at least, been so hard to be consistent in what I deem as work, and reevaluating what that means, I think is really important for all of us, that just showing up or not showing up is equally valuable and part of the work and important. So that maybe you show up another day.
I just want to say that these three people that are on this conversation with me, I found because of my persistence in our craft. When I was young, they tried to get me out of it. I was writing my first play, big play, was about Shakespeare's African mistress. And there were certain miscreants and jealous so-and-sos. I'll never forget. They said, why don't you do something else? You shouldn't write. I almost believed them. I'm glad I didn't, ultimately. But staying in this craft has allowed me to meet powerful thinkers and beautiful people like the three of you. And I don't think I would have found you if I weren't in this business. And the other thing is that this craft has allowed me to think in an interdisciplinary way, to make connections between history and politics and sex and love and desire in ways that I wish we would encourage more in our schools and in our homes. We don't just have a critical race theory problem in this country. We have a critical thinking and reading comprehension problem. We don't know how to read the people. let alone the books. And we're banning them anyway. And I think that one of the joys of working in this business is that it makes you think interdisciplinarily just by the nature of this craft. I think that it's an extraordinarily educational way of thinking about life. Theater artists can be some of the most brilliant problem solvers in the world, just by the nature of what they do. The other thing I want to highlight, and the final thing I want to say, is that this program is being hosted by Tyree Marshall, who is a young Black woman of color in the entertainment business, who is in arts administration. She works at several theaters that specialize in making work, new work by people of color. And I would be remiss not to talk about one of her current exploits. She is part of the production team that is producing with Skylight Theater and Playwrights Arena my piece, Lavender Men. And I'm talking about it not to sell tickets, not to promote the show. I'm talking about it because I'm excited by the production team that those two institutions have fostered in order to build this work. We talked at length about creating a culture of empathy and inclusion. And they took us to task, our creative team, to make sure that we really stayed true to that mission. And for that, I'm excited. I'm excited for Los Angeles, but also when the piece streams later on for the country, to see what I think is a model for a way we can invest long-term in the healthy life of an artist of color in the American theater. And so I want to just highlight and celebrate Tyree and thank her for producing this series, and specifically for bringing all of us together this evening to dream about a world outside of the binaries, wherever they might be.
And before may I add my little thing? I just need to share, as a neurodivergent person, and for those who are also neurodivergent and queer listening, it's okay to be scared. That's something I had to contend with processing the pandemic, where we're going, and just trying to piece my mind back together. And what does that mean? But also, when I'm a dramaturg, I always ask the creators, and they don't necessarily have to answer, but I always ask, for whom are you writing this piece for? And a lot of the creators often think I'm asking this grand, big question, and sometimes I just remind them, you can create art for yourself, just to remind you of the human being you are. And so I just want to remind you, if you are listening, just remind yourself that, that's why I always ask the question, how did art find you, or you found art? Don't forget to make art for yourself. At least for me, it reminds me I'm a human being. Yeah. Tyree, you want to come in? If not, we can keep going. Okay. I guess everyone, thank you, Skylight Theater. Thank you, Ianne, Jairo, Roger. And thank you, Seth, in the back. And thank you, Tyree, in the background as well. And we're all sending our love. Thank you so much. Goodbye, y'all.
And remember that Pride is not just in June. Pride is every day that you stand up unapologetically yourself.
That was amazing, right? Wow. I mean, the wordsmiths in this group. That was on purpose. Anyway, I want to thank the panelists for joining us from all different parts of the country. I want to thank our moderator, Gaven Trinidad, for holding it down with the conversation and the juicy topics for this evening. I want to thank Seth Dorcey for all the technical elements and why you could see me right now. I want to thank Michael TEOLI for the music. I want to thank Judith Bourne for PR. And I want to thank the entire Skylight staff for your contributions for tonight, and you, because you know what? You did the work tonight. You listened to conversations, and that's a big part in collective healing and uplifting other marginalized communities that need it. You listen. Now take that energy and put that out there to support others, okay? Anyway, before I go, reserve your ticket for Lavender Men. I'm serious, tickets are on sale. Go to our website, reserve them. I really want to meet you. Anyway, y'all have a great evening.